In this lesson, we're going to look at another type of factoring. This one is called the difference of two squares. And the factoring that we're going to look at right now only works when all three criteria apply. It's a difference, which means there's subtraction. It's a binomial, and each term is a perfect square. When all of those three things happen, then we have this magical thing called the difference of two squares, and we can factor it using this form. The very first thing we're going to do is go straight to the double bubble. One of those double bubble binomials is going to be a plus in the middle, and the other is going to have a minus in the middle. And that's what makes this turn into a binomial instead of a trinomial, because that middle term is going to cancel since we have opposite signs. Then you're going to put the square root of each term in its respective spot. And what I mean by its respective spot is the term that's first gets written first in the binomials, and the term that is second gets written second in the binomials. And then, since this factoring technique is really quick, it's always helpful to check. So you multiply your two binomials, you make sure that the middle term cancels, you make sure that you get what you want, and then you move on to the next question. So speaking about moving on to the next question, let's do that now. Example 1. We're going to factor it using the difference of two squares method, and we know that we can use this method because it's a difference, it's a binomial, and x squared is a perfect square, x times x, and 25 is a perfect square. We know that's 5 times 5. So you go straight to your double bubble. X squared is x times x. 25 is 5 times 5. One binomial is plus, the other is minus, and then that's your answer. It doesn't matter which one you put the plus sign in, but let's just double check, right? You get x squared minus 5x plus 5x minus 25. So there we go. All right, this next one, same thing. It's a difference. It's a binomial, and each term is a perfect square. So let's set up our double bubble. 4y squared is 2y times 2y. 1 is 1 times 1. One binomial is plus, the other is minus, and then that's your answer. We can check by doing FOIL. So 2y times 2y is 4y squared. Then you get 2y times negative 1. Then you get positive 1 times 2y, and you get positive 1 times negative 1. These cancel, so checked. Now, the cool thing about difference of two squares is you could also use it for just numbers, right? So I give you 54 squared minus 48 squared, and you say to me, Miss Lean, how am I supposed to do that without a calculator? Well, remember the rule. It's a difference. It's a binomial, and each piece is a perfect square. 54 squared is 54 times 54, right? So let's set up our binomials. You put the square root in the first spot. The square root of 54 squared is 54. The square root of 48 squared is 48. One binomial is plus, the other is minus. And now, without a calculator, we can do this. 54 plus 48 is 102. And 54 minus 48 is 6. So 6 times 102 is 612. So 54 squared minus 48 squared is 612. In a moment, I'm going to show you these things called perfect square trinomial patterns. It's not anything that you have to memorize, but it makes the factoring a little quicker. So I'm going to show you some examples. If you don't understand them, that's totally okay. You can just use the regular factoring technique of the double bubbles. If you understand the technique, then it makes the math way quicker to solve. So take a minute and just look at this perfect square trinomial pattern box. So when the coefficients of A and C are perfect squares, then chances are you can use this technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first recognize that this is 1, which is a perfect square, and this is 16, which is a perfect square. So what I can do is I can do the square root of 16, which is 4, and then I know that 4 is my number that goes inside. So it would be n4, n4. And again, this only works when both a and c are perfect squares. Now, since I want to get positive 8 in the middle, I do plus plus, and I'm done. The quicker way to write this would be n plus 4 in parentheses squared. That's how you might see it written in books, but it means the same thing. All right, down in example B, same thing. This is a perfect square. It's 2x times 2x, and this is 3 times 3, which is 9. So I know that I'm going to take this square root of 9, which is going to be 3, and I'll take the square root of that, which is going to be 2x. So I'm going to do my double bubble, 2x 3, 2x 3. Now if I want to get minus 12 in the middle, it's going to be both minus. So you can double check this if you want. If you want to pause the video and check me and multiply this, go for it. And the quicker way to write this would be 2x minus 3 squared. So more complex looking, but it's the same thing. X squared is a perfect square, it's x times x, and 1/9 is a perfect square because it's 1/3 times 1/3. So I'm going to set up my double bubble. It's going to be x 1/3 equals 0, and I want to get positive 2/3 in the middle, so it's going to be plus plus. So now it wants me to solve. So I need to drop my line like we did back in an earlier lesson where we found out what the value of x was. Obviously, they're going to be the same, so I don't need to solve it twice. If x plus 1/3 equals 0, that means that the value of x is negative 1/3. All right, last one together. A bird picks up a golf ball and drops it while flying. The function represents the height of the golf ball t seconds after it is dropped. The ball hits the top of a 32-foot tall pine tree. After how many seconds does the ball hit the tree? So I'm going to add to this picture because it doesn't have the picture of the pine tree. So here's my tree. Okay. All right. And the tree is 32 feet tall. So what we're trying to find is when does 81 minus 16t squared equal 32, right? Because this is the 32 mark. So let's set that up. 81 minus 16t squared equals 32. It's not going to be equal to 0 because 0 would represent the ground. Now, you can't solve anything until it equals 0. I told you to write that down in an earlier lesson. So I have to move the 32 over. So I'll subtract 32. And you get 49 minus 16t squared equals 0. Now that it equals 0, I can factor. That's the order. You can't factor before it equals 0. So I'll do the double bubble because I recognize that 49 and 16 and t squared, they're all perfect squares. So I have 7 and 4t. One's plus, one's minus. And now since they're different, I have to solve each of them separately. So 7 plus 4t could be the 0. And that would give me, I don't know, what is that? Negative 1.75. Or 7 minus 4t could be the 0. So that is going to give 1.75. And obviously this one doesn't make sense because you can't have a negative time. So the answer is 1.75 seconds. All right, if you have any questions, write them down and ask me when you come to class.